All right, what's going on, y'all? So as y'all know, I've been very honest on this channel over the last several years, but today's going to be by far the most vulnerable video I've ever done. Today we're going to talk about some pretty deep, personal, and tough topics, and I'm very aware I'm probably going to lose some followers from this. A lot of you aren't going to agree with this, and this could affect some personal relationships I've got, but this is truly coming from the heart and from a place of love. And if this helps even just one of you out there not make the mistakes I made, not go through the pain and turmoil I've gone through, this video will be a massive, massive, massive success in my book. So before we get into the topics of the title of the video, why y'all clicked on the video, I gotta take y'all back a little bit. I gotta show y'all a little bit of the journey and how we got there. So growing up, I grew up in a Protestant, non-denominational household. We went to non-denominational churches growing up, and like a lot of kids growing up, I went through the motions. I had no deep relationship with God. I would be what I consider now a lukewarm Christian. I was a lukewarm Christian at best. And, I was around a lot of people that, were not great examples of true Christians. People truly exemplifying what it means to be a Christ follower. A lot of people around me were what I consider to be lukewarm Christians. And so because of this, I had no deep faith. I had no deep relationship with God. And so when I went off to college, I had no faith. But I very quickly learned that I was a seeker. I wanted to find, what's the meaning of the universe? What's our purpose for being here? How do we find enlightenment? All of that. So I started seeking. So probably sophomore, junior year of college, I was interested in the Catholic Church. So I started going through RCIA and learning about the Catholic Church. And I never ended up getting confirmed, but that was a very, very valuable experience for me. And I learned a lot about that. And then leaving college, this is when I really, really got deeply into spirituality. If I wasn't working or working out, my hobby essentially was spirituality and really trying to figure out the deep, deep, deep meanings of the universe, how to have that like overwhelming peace, what is enlightenment, all of that. So I started studying a lot of different religions, really studied heavily in Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity. And then I got into New Age, not, kind of the tarot card, that kind of side, but more of the law of attraction, manifesting, I am affirmations, we all are God, that whole thing. And during this time as well, I was into ultra running. So I was spending, hours and hours and hours alone out on the trail and working through a lot of this. And during this time, I would have these glimpses, these moments where I felt like I was tapping into God's presence or maybe figuring out, the right direction. But it would be very fleeting, and it would leave me feeling even more confused and even more lost. The more I went down this path, the more I would kind of logically think I was heading in the right direction, but just deep down in my soul, I still felt more and more and more confused. While still, experiencing kind of the peace you get from meditating and fasting and all that. I was doing all of that and having that peace. And so I was just ultimately really, really, really confused. And throughout this time too, with the New Age and all that, I didn't believe in hell. And because of this, I grew up knowing, right and wrong and all that, but I had no deep set in morality because of this. I was, I had e-commerce businesses, digital marketing businesses, went from there, became a professional bodybuilder. And then during this time, as my social media was growing and all of that, I started getting tons and tons of comments and DMs, do you have OnlyFans? Do you have OnlyFans? And in the beginning, it was very easy to pass off. It was not something I ever really entertained. But then I started hearing rumors of the money. And then I met a few people in person who were on OnlyFans, and the amount of money they were making was absolutely insane. So I decided to dip my feet in. And when I dipped my feet in, it was very apparent how much money was in this space. So I went all in. And with this, even though I had no kind of deep set morality, I still knew right and wrong, and it didn't feel right. So because it didn't feel right, and during this time too, I had no issue with dealing with lust or anything like that. I was married, my wife and I were doing this in agreement, but I was not doing this for anybody's attention. It was purely for the money. And so what I wanted to do was remove myself from it completely. It didn't feel right. I didn't like interacting with any of it. So what I did is I hired an agency. That way, all I had to do was take the content, take the picture, take the video, only a few a week, send it to the agency, and then they dealt with the rest. They They talked to everybody for me. They put the content up. They acted as me. And I can honestly say every day for these few months that I was on, it was so soul sucking. It was the darkest time of my life. This would have been spring or summer of 2023. And this is truly the darkest time of my life. Felt insanely lost. And how I would describe it to people is, what it felt like is if someone around the world was enjoying my content, it was almost as if they were sucking a part of my soul away from me. Looking back now, what it really was what I believe is Matthew 18:6. It says, if any one of you causes one of those who believe in me to sin, it'd be better for you to have a millstone hung around your neck and you thrown into the sea. I truly believe that because I was not only participating in something that wasn't good, I was also helping other people be further from God. Because of this, I truly, every day, it was wrecking my soul. It was just absolute turmoil, even though the money was insane. I was making $40,000 to $50,000 a month, easy. It was the easiest money I've ever made in my entire life. But I've never been more lost, more depressed, more dark than I ever was during this time. So it all culminated. There's about 2-week period where it was like every hour of every day. It was absolute, the most pain, turmoil, just disgusting feeling. And so one night my wife was asleep and I was alone in the living room, and I just literally was brought to my knees, bawling, crying. And for the first time in my life, I truly called out to God. It wasn't, how I was seeking, when I was doing New Age. It wasn't, how I prayed when I was growing up. I was truly calling out to God and begging for God. Almost instantaneous. I had the most overwhelming peace and love overcoming. I had chills just from the top of my head to the soles of my feet, feeling just that overwhelming, immense level of peace. The most peace I've ever felt in my life. So right then and there, I gave my life to Christ. And when I gave my life to Christ, that peace, that overwhelming peace and love, it was just there. And it was what I had been searching for all of these years. That confusion, that lost feeling when I was going through New Age and seeking and all of that, that was no longer there. It was, this is it. It was just that deep, 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 deep peace. So I immediately shut down OnlyFans. And, I think I, like a lot of new Christians, new believers, I was ignorant or arrogant, thinking that, if I do, what I felt like God was calling me to do, and I'm, kind of doing the right stuff, it's just going to be roses and sunshine. I'm going to have that overwhelming, deep level of peace on a daily basis. And yeah, I might have some trials come up, and, not every day is going to be a great day, but I'm going to still be walking with God and have that peace. That wasn't true. But before, that started really kind of dissipating, fall, I first got baptized October of 2023. And then that right around the time I got baptized is when God started working on me about bodybuilding. I was a professional bodybuilder at the time. I was 260 pounds, taking steroids, and really, really, really focused on competing. I had shows lined up for the 2024 season, all of that. And just like with the OnlyFans, started feeling that same thing of, this doesn't feel right, this doesn't feel right. But keep in mind, my passion was bodybuilding. So I was doing everything in my mind to kind of push against that. But I'm spending time praying, reading the Bible, going to church, and felt more and more convicted that wasn't right. And so I retired from competitive bodybuilding and I gave up steroids. And that was another moment where I felt, I'm truly on purpose, walking with God, hearing his voice, and obeying him. But then from there, I retired from bodybuilding, I believe spring of 2024, or early 2024. And then that's when the distractions of the world and all of that started pulling me away from my relationship with God. And it wasn't like, it wasn't anything overnight. It wasn't any bad. I was doing everything kind of good on paper. There was no like real apparent sin or anything I was dealing with. But I started not feeling close to God. Keep in mind, during this time, pretty much every morning, reading the Bible, doing devotionals, praying morning and night, going to church probably 2 times a week. We were going to non-denominational church at the time, kind of doing everything right. But looking back, it's truly what I consider to be a lukewarm Christian. Now, lukewarm Christian, in my opinion, is the most dangerous spot you can be in. And this is, looking around, I truly believe so many Christians out there are lukewarm Christians. And in my opinion, to be better to be atheist or agnostic than to be a lukewarm Christian, because at least if you're on this side, God can really, really work through you and show you, show himself to you. But if you're a lukewarm Christian, you already believe you're in the right. So if you already believe you're in the right, you're not really looking to change or anything like that. Or it's going to be really hard it's going to be harder, in my opinion, for that turnaround. So I was a lukewarm Christian. And months go by, and I just don't feel, real close to God, but, I'm still, going through the motions, all of that. And then I got a consulting offer. I started consulting with a new fintech company. And then I executed extremely well with that. That turned into a salary position offer. And during this whole time, this is a very, very exciting position and all of that. But even with that, it didn't really feel right. None of it really felt right. Even though on paper, everything should be. It was a lucrative deal. I'm executing extremely well. The business is doing really well, but it didn't feel right. And I initially thought it didn't feel right just because it was a huge life change, going from being a pro bodybuilder, full-time coach, to then, something in a completely different industry. And it happens to be in the cannabis industry. And I've smoked, weed off and on throughout the years. It had nothing really against weed. I didn't think, it was, a sin per se. But keep in mind during this time when I got saved, and I was saved from that OnlyFans period and got baptized. During that time, I naturally took a tea break. Looking back, it was definitely God had worked through me. But I was taking a break from smoking weed for months during that whole period when I was really, really locking into God and really walking with him. And it wasn't anything intentional. I just thought it was very natural, essentially. So then I get into this business and start smoking a little bit more, all that. It's not feeling right. Then I start feeling convicted about cannabis. And so I went ahead and pulled cannabis. And then as soon as I pulled cannabis, once again, there's an overwhelming peace. And what I can say about cannabis, my experience with it is, I don't think it's directly a sin per se, but what I've noticed, at least in my life, is it almost keeps you spiritually numb. It's like that deep personal relationship with God where you can truly feel like you're walking with him. You can hear his voice, his direction for your life. That's no longer there, at least when I was smoking weed and using marijuana and all that. So from there, I gave up weed, and then just like with the OnlyFans thing, the Matthew 18:6, I didn't feel right, participating in a business that could potentially really be hindering someone from finding God or being close to God or anything like that. So with that, I thought that was the big root issue, but with the biggest root issue and what's caused OnlyFans, what's caused all this pain along the time, and what's really been the root issue for all my years, what I found out to be is my attitude around money. And that's where this video, I really, really want to emphasize, because I think in 2025, especially in America and where social media is set up and all that, our attitude on money, even in the church, in my opinion, is so dangerous. It's such a focus on making money from more. You even see this in non-denominational churches with the prosperity gospel. Even as a kid, the prosperity gospel never really sat right. I'd see those prosperity preachers, people like Kenneth Copeland, Joel Osteen, people who had like mega mansions and bragging about their cars and their watches. That never really felt right to me. But, with that being said, even in a lot of churches, it's still very much encouraged, and growing wealth and all of that is almost seen as if you're growing wealth and all that, you're walking in favor with God. Now, I want to emphasize right here, I truly do not believe that money is evil. I believe money is neutral, and it's neither good nor bad. It's how you use it. And I believe you can absolutely be a godly man or woman and have a lot of money. But I believe that, we are just stewards of what we've been given here on earth. It's not our money, it's God's money. And so it's how we go ahead and use that. Are we using it for God's kingdom, or are we using it for our own gain and all of that? You know, when we get to heaven, God isn't going to look at us and be like, did you have a good time? It's going to be, did you learn to love? And so, you know, my attitude around money has been essentially what's been my biggest hindrance for all these years. You know, it was always that kind of just more, me, the focus and the chase of money. And, you know, that's not even to say that, you know, I was really materialistic. You know, I can say that some positives came out of that new age time. And one of them was, you know, I really did drop a lot of materialism. I didn't have really a lot of materialistic wants, but it was still that kind of that chase of money, even for just the security of it. You know, just having that security of not really having to worry about anything. And then also, you know, wanting to give my wife and future kids the best life possible, wanting them to have luxuries and stuff. Even though I didn't necessarily want materialism, I still wanted to provide my family with that. And so it was always just a focus of making money for me, not really for expanding God's kingdom. And this is where once I relinquished that attitude, and it was no longer the goal of business for money, but truly, you know, just allowing God to work through me and just giving him everything, just fully surrendering to him and trusting in him. This is where I truly have found the most immense level of peace. And, you know, I truly believe that, you know, if you're good with what you've been entrusted, God's going to entrust you with more, but it should be for God's kingdom. So, you know, you can absolutely be a great man of God, a great woman of God, and have a lot of money, but it's how are you steward of money? So, you know, there's someone here I know in Austin. He owns a private equity firm, or he provides capital for small Christian businesses. You know, there's those people out there that you hear about. You know, they just will go ahead and pay someone's medical bill, someone in need, pay a mortgage or rent. These are ways in which, you know, people with money can go ahead and use their money to further God's kingdom and show God's love. But, you know, a lot of these Christians that are, you know, going ahead and using mega wealth to just buy more properties, take more vacations, buy more purses, more watches, all of that. You know, I don't think when we get to heaven, Jesus is going to be, you know, very happy with that. I had on my goals, I have all my goals written down. I wanted to get a gold Rolex Submariner. And even when I wrote that down, that didn't even feel right. Like I said, I didn't really have materialistic wants. It wasn't even like, that wasn't a deep locked in want. And when I wrote it, it didn't feel right. But it was more of like, I justified it by like, oh, this is going to be for when I hit this business milestone. During this time when my attitude around money changed, I went through and crossed that out. And my new goal ended up being, I will give at least 10% of my income each month to people in need. And so that can be anything, you know, it's whatever I feel God is calling me to. But the whole point here is my attitude around money has changed, and that's what's revolutionized everything. So, you know, I think, you know, everybody thinks that kind of the OnlyFans is kind of the biggest issue because it's, you know, the most in your face sin. But I truly believe greed and our attitude around money, it's become, even in the church, somewhat accepted. And it's something that I personally now deeply disagree with. Not on making money. Like I said, I don't believe money's bad, but the whole making money for personal gain, I absolutely do believe that's a very dangerous spot to be in. And Jesus said in multiple different times, you know, it's easier for a camel to pass through an eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter heaven. Then there's that rich man that came to Jesus and said, you know, I followed all the commandments. I've been a good man. What do I need to do to enter heaven? And Jesus said, go sell all your possessions and come follow me. And he went away sad because he wasn't able to do it. I truly believe that wealth is one of the most dangerous things. And what it is it's a magnifying glass on where your heart is. So if your heart's in the right place and you truly are walking with God, then God can entrust you with that wealth because you're going to use it for his kingdom. But if you're not truly walking with God, and say you're a lukewarm Christian, then when that money comes into your hands, you're not going to use it to further his kingdom like what he wants. You're going to be using it for personal gain, and that shows where you're at. And so this also now gets to where God is still working through me. I'm far from perfect, and I feel, you know, more and more massive changes are happening in my life. And like I've said, you know, I grew up in Protestant household and going to non-denominational churches, and that's what we've been going through this last year, and that no longer felt right and was no longer resonating. There's so many great people in non-denominational churches. This is no bash to anybody like that. I've just seen so much what I consider to be lukewarm Christians, to where they'd be praising God and worshiping God in church and tithing 10% or whatever, and then how they live their life didn't match up to that at all. And that's with, frankly, any denomination, even Catholicism, Orthodoxy, all that. But point is, I do feel like now, at least what I've seen in non-denominational churches is almost this justification of so many sins out there that, we're not saved by works, but by faith. But it's almost like that side, the denominational side or Protestant side, has almost taken away faith completely, or works completely, meaning like you can kind of do whatever you want, as long as it's not a super bad sin. You can kind of do whatever you want because we are saved. But the true thing is, if you truly are saved and you're walking with God, then your works are going to truly flow out of it. So if your works aren't truly flowing out of it, that's where, you need to reevaluate your life. And that's where I was. My works, I would, say I was Christian and all that, and I saved by faith, but my works were not aligning with that at all. The system is designed to keep us away from God. So that's why social media, everything you see, even in churches, this is where there's just very much a culture of more. And on the flip side too, just like mega wealth can be extremely dangerous, being broke can also keep you from God, because you're also now in that mindset of chasing money and you're not having your focus on God. So this isn't to say money's bad. Once again, money's not bad. And if you don't have money, it's going to be a little bit more challenging, or it could be challenging. There's a lot of poor people that, in my opinion, are the best people. But it can also make it a challenge on that end. But that's the point too, studying and looking around, and through all these years, when I was seeking before I found God and all that, one of the things I did was I was constantly always observing people and really seeing, who are good people, who are bad people. And what I have found is, while there are some really good, really wealthy people, that's few and far between. Most really wealthy people that I've observed are not what I would be considered walking with God. And on the flip side, some of the most good, godly people I know live pretty modestly, and their whole focus is on Jesus and on God. And so, with that being said, my focus is still, it's still, business. This is one of the gifts and the passions and talents God has given me, but the focus has completely changed. It's all surrendered to Him and letting Him work through me, and then the resources that I have, is purely for His gain. It's not for my gain now, and that's where my focus around money has completely changed. Now this, I can have many topics on essentially any one of the things we've talked about, and I'm sure many more are going to come out of this, but that's where I'm at now. Changes are coming out of this. So like I mentioned, we haven't been, my wife and I haven't been resonating with non-denominational churches for a good minute. And so now we have been deeply, studying Catholicism and Orthodoxy, and now we're trying Orthodox churches, and that is resonating like you would not believe. The reverence, the traditionalism, and the lack of almost acceptance of the ways of the world now. It is much more what I believe to be what the first church was. But the ways of the world right now should not be accepted by the church. That's not how Jesus called us to be. And so, the more you can, here's one of the kind of the mindsets I got into that really changed things up for me. If Jesus was walking with me in person, walking with me on a daily basis throughout everything I did, if He was sitting right there with me, walking with me, would I be spending money on what I was spending money on? Would I be doing the things I was doing? And the answer was no. My attitude around money was different. So that's where, if this resonates with you at all, I would deeply search, how is your attitude around money? Because like I said, I thought the root issue was, I was doing OnlyFans, Then it, was, well, I'm still doing steroids. Then it was cannabis. And keep in mind, look at all of this too. OnlyFans, then steroids, cannabis. These are justifications. And think how many people too, how many Christians are justifying stuff like that. We potentially are in very, very dangerous times right now. The battle between good and evil, it's very, very, very apparent. And I know many of you watching this know that. You deeply feel that. It's very apparent just looking around in the world right now. The battle between good and evil is very apparent. And the attitude around money and the lackadaisical approach around so many of these looser sins that aren't as in your face as something like porn or like murder or something like that. Greed is one that's almost accepted by the church. Greed and gluttony, both. Those two, greed and gluttony, are ones that, like, a lot of churches, at least churches I've been to, they almost celebrate it in a way. And it's just not something that, when I was in it, I didn't think anything was wrong. And I can tell you that truly took away from my life quite a bit. And so my attitude around money, making money and all that is completely different, and is truly now for his kingdom. Everything is meant to keep us self-centered and selfish, and we have to stay centered on God to keep him the center and the focus of our life. And the more I have done that, and the more I just surrender myself to him and trust in him, the more peace, the more love I've felt. And that doesn't mean the days necessarily get easier, the external circumstances necessarily get easier, but the internal is always at peace. But that's my testimony. God is still very much at work in me. I feel like every few weeks is another pretty big change in my life. But I also feel like, I truly am walking with God and following his direction for my life. And my wife is, the same way. We're doing this together, and we both are in very much agreement. Just like when, we discovered, Catholicism and then Orthodoxy, it very much rang true. Something completely different than me and her had ever really done. And it's something that, is really resonating with us. But I hope this helped any of you out there. If you've got any questions, comments, anything like that, definitely drop them down below. I know not all of you are going to agree with this at all. And a lot of you are probably going to think I'm pretty crazy and nuts and all that. But this is authentically me. And I want to put this out there to help anybody, because I truly feel like the battle between good and evil is raging on right now. And whether you think we're in the end times or not, I want you to at least live a more peaceful, love-centered life, focused on God, and the viewpoint on money and all that, and where we're at in 2025. That's being forced down everybody's throats on, we should constantly be chasing more in an attitude of me. And the more I have gotten away from that and just trusted God and surrendered to God, the happier I become. So I hope this helps you. If you did, please go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Be happy, be positive, be powerful, and have a great rest of your day.